Hello there and welcome back to another episode of our Luminar NEO Academy, the show where we help you to get the most out of this photo editing application. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub and I'm a creator and founder here at Clever Photographer. Now, before we're going to start, I have a few things I want to cover. First of all, at the end of the video, I'm gonna give you access to our popular Luminar NEO shortcut cheat sheet, so you make sure that you stay until the end. Also, if you don't own Luminar NEO or the HDR Merge plugin, get our discount code to get the best possible price, and you can find it in the description of this video. Finally, I would like to ask you to please like, comment and share on this video, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can keep creating content like this. Hello there and welcome back to the second episode of our Photography Noise Mini-Series celebrating the release of the Noiseless AI extension for Luminar NEO. In the first episode we covered all the theory about photography noise, and if you missed the episode, make sure you go back and watch it to learn what are the different types of noise and what causes it. In today's episode, we will look at 5 ways of how to reduce noise in your camera. These ways you will get the best possible result before starting the photo editing process. So starting with the most obvious one, the tip number 1 is to shoot at lower ISO setting. Yes, we are starting with the most obvious method, but photographers often push their ISO too high too fast. This then leads to the bad image quality. The ISO functionality will be great if your camera is 3 years old or newer. You shouldn't see too much noise creeping into your images even if you go as high as 3200. However, there may be still some noise at their higher ISO numbers such as ISO 6400, ISO 12800 and beyond. The idea is not to raise your ISO too much. Instead, be aware of your exposure and recognize that shooting at high ISO will produce more noise in your images. Boost your ISO if necessary, but consider other options before dialing ISO 12800 or something similar. Now here are a few items to think about before increasing your ISO. First of all, open your aperture to its widest setting. Check on your lens, something like f2.8 or f4 is usually a good starting point. The second point, if you're shooting in a low light, use a tripod and drop your shutter speed. The third point, if you're shooting a smaller subject, for example person or an item, use a flash. Each of these strategies will help you to get nice bright exposure without the need of raising your ISO. Of course, if your shots are still turning dark, then you will need to push your ISO up. If you want to see the ideal ISO range for your camera, you should check out our first episode as we show you where to find this information. Once you find the perfect range for your camera, you can work around it, sometimes with the help of a standard noise removal tools and sometimes with the unique tools like a Noiseless AI. The tip number 2 is to shoot in a RAW format. RAW is a great way to get the best out of your images, so be sure to use it. Also, if you're not 100% sure about the difference between a JPEG and RAW file, you should check out our blog post in the description of this video. Now, why is this so important? JPEG comes with the compression, a process during which noise becomes baked into your images, and there is also significantly less data to work with. So removing noise in a post-production becomes tough even for the special tools like Noiseless AI. And now it's time to go for the tip number 3, which is to expose correctly from the start. Boosting a too dark image in post-processing will reveal noise, which is why you must get the best exposure right from the beginning. When you are out shooting, we highly recommend checking your camera screen, including the histogram, to make sure you had the right exposure. And don't be afraid to take several shots at the different exposures, especially if you're dealing with a tricky scene. Better to be safe than sorry. Many photographers use bracketing for this, and if you never used it before, you should check out our HDR photography tutorial to learn how to bracket your shots. I will add a link to the corner of your screen and into the description of this video. To make it even more complicated, it's good to remember that higher ISO, the more unforgiving your image is. In other words, if you're using a high ISO, you better get the right exposure because boosting an underexposed high ISO image will result in a very noisy mess. Of course, that to finish it off, you shouldn't overexpose your image either. While overexposure won't cause problem with the noise, it will destroy your details, which is never a good thing. Now, tip number 4 involving a long exposure. You should be careful, especially when you're doing extra long exposure. Long exposure produces some of the most dramatic images, but if the exposure is too long, the camera sensor heat up and cause unwanted noise. But of course, don't let this stop you from doing long exposures. You should just be aware of how long your camera handles the long exposure time. In fact, you can do a little test. You may consider shooting a series of long exposures and then checking each file on your computer for noise. Then, once you determine your camera limitations, make sure that you don't set your shutter speed for longer than your camera can handle. The critical point here is to know your gear's limits and shoot within those limits. As a result, you end up with great images and have an easy time when editing. And finally, the tip number 5 is to use the in-camera noise reduction. Many cameras now offer a function called long exposure noise reduction or noise reduction. And if you're doing long exposures, it's a good idea to turn it on. Now, why would you do this? Well, as we just mentioned, long exposure photos are especially prone to noise. Therefore, a prolonged or long exposure noise reduction option is designed to counteract this issue. How does it do that? Well, by taking the second shot after the first and then using the noise profile of the second image to subtract noise from the first. Now, the long exposure noise reduction comes with a drawback. It takes time, usually as long as the original exposure. So if you use a 30-second shutter speed, the camera will take another additional 30 seconds to get rid of the noise. And if you shoot for an hour, you'll need another hour to reduce the noise, which is quite a long time. So yes, it may be impractical if you're doing 10-minute shots, but for the medium-length long exposures, it's often worth doing. So now you know 5 of the essential tips on how to reduce or eliminate noise on your photos in your camera. So we now covered all the theory behind the photography noise, and it's finally time to look at the highly anticipated Noiseless AI extension in the next episode. And there you have it. If you want a copy of our popular Luminar NEO shortcut cheat sheet, there is nothing easier than heading to our website cleverphotographer.com/LuminarGift. While you're there, you can also check out one of our popular Luminar NEO products, or you can stay here and watch more videos about Luminar NEO. For today, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure that you like, comment and share on this video. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can keep creating content like this. For today, thank you very much for watching. My name was Jakub, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.